This is the story of the Beta Iris. The Beta was an Estes kit from the 1970s, one of the rockets in their Mini Brute series. It is a small two-stage rocket using mini 13mm motors. For 2011, I added a payload section known as my Iris project. It adds 5 inches in length and 4 grams of mass to the Beta. The new payload section is contained between the two black rings. This rocket has flown maybe 4 times in the 1970s. But July 2nd, 2011 was its first flight with Iris, using the maximum power A10 and A3 motor combination. The flight was successful, but the altimeter 1 battery died, so I was not able to get any data from this flight. I returned the next morning with a charged altimeter. Using the small A10 A3 power combination again, the Beta Iris achieved 714 feet. I was amazed, and it is an altitude record that still stands today. 1 month later, it flew again, this time using a 1/2 A3 upper stage and a 4-foot Mylar streamer in place of the 10-inch parachute. The flight was a complete success. After a long winter's rest, it flew again in the spring, with a full power combination of an A10 booster and an A3 sustainer. It also carried a new altimeter that includes a 3-axis accelerometer. The booster brought it to about 100 feet, and the second stage failed to ignite. After an apogee of 157 feet, it lawn darted at high speed into the ground and sustained heavy damage. The payload section was completely torn apart, but the internal padding protected the electronics. Most of the rocket body was intact. The nose cone was driven deep into the mud and had to be removed with pliers. During its underground phase, it soaked up a lot of moisture and swelled out of shape. The motor mounts were fine. The motors oriented correctly and tightly held with cellophane tape. There was some soot on the upper stage nozzle, but for unknown reasons, the stage did not catch. Both motors were relatively new and were stored in a cool, dry place. Here we see the very last moment before impact. I repaired her quickly, and in 2 months it was ready to fly again. It had a new payload tube, but the main body tube was barely sound enough for flight. This flight used the lower power 1/2 A3 sustainer motor. The boost was good, staging went well, and the sustainer stage streaked skyward at 112 miles per hour to an altitude of 432 feet. Six weeks later, I attempted another full-power flight. Again, there was no second stage ignition. I watched in horror as it again drove itself into the ground. There clearly was something wrong with this motor. The booster pushed it to 52 miles per hour and an altitude of 147 feet. This time, the nose cone drilled deep into the earth, but it also drove itself down into the payload section. The Ca-hardened tube acted as a knife and shaved a sliver of balsa off of the nose cone. This absorbed most of the energy, so the main tube was hardly crumpled on the end. The lower body tube sustained more damage. Accident investigation revealed that in the first staging accident, I mistakenly mixed the upper stage motor with all of the other new motors. Bad luck caused me to grab this exact same motor again. There was a piece of telltale masking tape on the casing that was left on from the accident flight. I didn't think of that when I grabbed the motor with tape on it. The nose cone was repaired by gluing the balsa shaving on again and using lots of filler and sanding before the final painting finish. I removed and replaced the already weak launch lugs, in part because I was going to use the lower lug to act as a reinforcement to a weakened lower body tube seam that was hardened with a good soaking of Ca glue. The rebuilt Beta now had a new upper body tube below the payload tube. Both sections can be identified with black bands around the body. By late fall, it was ready to fly again. November 4th, 2012. This was to be another full-power flight in stronger winds. I was not concerned with the drifting in the wind because the streamer allows this rocket to return at about 20 miles per hour. The rocket boosted fine, turned into the wind about 20 degrees, so after successful staging, the rocket flew fairly far upwind. It only achieved 515 feet, but sped along at 124 miles per hour. 3 weeks later, I tried again to gather data on full-power flights. This flight was also very successful. The motors turned in an all-time speed record for this model. In the calm winds, the booster fell right in the launch area. In this flight, the Beta Iris streaked ahead to a speed record of 132 miles per hour, and it reached an altitude of 682 feet. I was so happy with this flight that I again flew it with maximum A10 and A3 power. The flight up was just as successful, reaching 594 feet at a speed of 122 miles per hour. I tracked the small booster back to the ground, then turned to look for the long, shiny red streamer in the sky. I found it, but then realized there was no rocket attached. After a 20-minute search, I found the rocket with the swivel hook attachment broken. It was lying in the soft grass, but it had a big dent on the leading edge of the fin, caused by the recoil of the shock cord slamming the payload tube against the fin. The following spring of 2013, I flew it again, having replaced the missing streamer for a small parachute again. This flight was only using a 1/2 A3 upper motor. All went well, and Beta came back reporting 429 feet and 108 miles per hour. With the new parachute, it achieved a duration record of 49 1/2 seconds aloft. I flew it again with a 1/2 A upper stage in the summer of 2013. This time it reached 440 feet, a record high for the 1/2 A motor. Top speed was 106 miles per hour. As of now, that was the last flight so far, but there certainly will be more. The Beta Iris has now logged 15 flights, estimating about 4 flights in the 1970s that weren't recorded. The highest altitude was 714 feet. The highest speed, 132 miles per hour, and the longest flight was 49 1/2 seconds duration.